On this edition for Saturday, March 10th, new reactions to President Trump's agreement to meet with North Korea. Also, the plight of the Rohingya Muslims still living in Myanmar. And a new documentary on the secret life of an iconic Hollywood actress. Next on PBS NewsHour Weekend.
From the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center in New York, Hari Srinivasan.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We are learning more about the conditions President Trump is demanding of North Korea ahead of a possible face-to-face meeting with Kim Jong-un. On Twitter, President Trump pointed out that North Korea has not conducted a missile test since last November and says they, quote, promised not to do so through our meetings. So far, North Korean state media has not even mentioned plans for a meeting between the two leaders. Also on Twitter, the president shared reactions from other world leaders. After speaking with China's President Xi Jinping, the president said, quote, he appreciates that the U.S. is working to solve the problem diplomatically. After speaking with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Trump tweeted that Abe was, quote, very enthusiastic about talks with North Korea. Yesterday, the White House said the meeting would not take place without, quote, concrete actions that match promises that had been made by North Korea. The U.S. and European Union failed to reach an agreement on exemptions to new U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs today. The EU's trade commissioner hoped to reach a deal on exemptions from the 25% steel and 10% aluminum tariffs during her meeting with top U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer. They are set to meet again next week. President Trump tweeted today that if the EU drops, quote, their horrific barriers and tariffs on U.S. products going in, we will likewise drop ours. Canada and Mexico are currently exempt from the steel and aluminum tariffs, and Australia is negotiating an exemption as well. Lighthizer also met with top Japanese officials who have voiced concerns over the tariffs setting off a trade war. The tariffs are set to take effect in 2 weeks. The Department of Justice announced today plans to ban devices that allow rifles to fire like automatic weapons, likely setting up a legal battle with gun manufacturers and pro-gun groups. In a statement, the Justice Department laid out its proposal to reclassify bump stock type devices as machine guns, which are already banned under federal law. Following the school shooting in Florida last month, President Trump pushed the DOJ to begin the process of banning the devices, sidestepping congressional approval. Bump stocks were used in last year's mass shooting in Las Vegas that left 58 dead, but not the Parkland High School massacre. Investigators are working to determine why a former Army rifleman and Afghan war veteran killed 3 women who devoted their lives to helping traumatized vets. Authorities say the gunman killed 48-year-old Christine Lober, 42-year-old Jennifer Golick, and 29-year-old Jennifer Gonzalez during a standoff at California's Pathway Home, the largest veterans home in the U.S. The gunman had been kicked out of a treatment program there. Officers found his body yesterday along with the 3 women following a standoff that lasted about 8 hours. We are learning more about the Pentagon's plans for President Trump's military parade. According to a Pentagon memo sent to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Washington, D.C. parade will highlight the contributions of vets throughout U.S. history. It will include several airplane flyovers, but no tanks, which could damage roads. The memo did not include the cost of the parade, but the White House has previously estimated it to cost between $10 and $30 million. The parade is being planned for Veterans Day, which happens to be just 5 days after the midterm elections. Afghan state forces took heavy losses in a Taliban attack in western Farah province. Soldiers were reportedly preparing for an operation in the Bala Baluk district. Local officials say at least 15 soldiers died, including several members of Afghanistan's special forces. This is just the latest in a surge of Taliban attacks across Afghanistan. Meet one of the first openly transgender recruits to join the military on our website, pbs.org/newshour. When President Trump accepted an invitation to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on Thursday, his top diplomat was on the other side of the world. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is in the middle of a 5-country tour in Africa, an already charged trip to boost relations after President Trump reportedly used a slur to refer to African nations at a meeting with U.S. lawmakers in January. Josh Lederman of the Associated Press has been traveling with Secretary Tillerson and joins me now via Skype from Nairobi, Kenya. So today, interestingly enough, Secretary Tillerson is actually not out meeting people and not doing all this stuff because he got sick. Explain.
The State Department said that he was under the weather after basically being up for 2 days straight, dealing the night before with the North Korea announcement that came out of the White House. The secretary was on the phone with the president in the middle of the night in Ethiopia, is where we were at the time. And as a result, he's really been pushing it to the max, and they say he needed a day to get back up to speed.
The secretary has said that this meeting is just a meeting. It's not a negotiation. Is there a distinction?
The distinction that U.S. officials seem to be drawing is that you have talks initially where you essentially build some rapport, some trust, see if you can even agree on basic terms and have enough common ground to move forward together. And then you proceed to the next step, negotiations, where you're actually saying, all right, what are you willing to do? What are we willing to do? What kind of mechanisms would you even have to put in place to verify that both sides are complying? And can we actually reach an agreement on paper?
How engaged has Secretary Tillerson been on this issue? Also considering that there are lots of things that happen before a meeting, lots of sort of lower level people go out and meet. And in some cases, those positions are not yet filled in the State Department.
That's right. There's no U.S. ambassador to South Korea. The U.S. Special Envoy for North Korea talks, Joseph Yoon, retired in the last few weeks, and there are many other key vacancies that would seem to be very relevant to this. Look, Tillerson was very involved in trying to put so many sanctions on North Korea that they would be economically compelled to come to the table. But as far as the decision to have talks or not have talks, Tillerson has often seemed at odds with the president, pushing for talks when the president wasn't, and vice versa. And over the past few days, it seemed that he's been relatively removed from the situation.
And part of Tillerson's mission on this tour is to make nice with African leaders who might still be holding a grudge about President Trump's alleged comments.
That's right. We've been asking about this at every stop that we've been in Africa so far, and the U.S. officials really continue to say this isn't a huge issue, that African countries are ready to move on, but you can feel that tension in the air. The civil society groups, the human rights groups, others in Africa certainly not willing to just let that slide, and it seems to be the undertone for the whole trip.
Has the continent become more important to the United States, partly because of the increased amount of investments that China is making?
China's investments and rivalry with the United States, so to speak, on the continent is a huge issue. But look, Africa is increasingly relevant to the United States for practical reasons. The population here is booming, expected to be much, much larger in the coming decades. The economies here are growing very, very fast. And the counterterrorism threat has really started to shift from parts of the Middle East to Africa, especially as the Islamic State group in Iraq and Syria nears a defeat.
All right, Josh Lederman of the Associated Press joining us via Skype from Nairobi. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
Since last summer, nearly 700,000 minority Rohingya Muslims have fled Myanmar to neighboring Bangladesh, escaping attacks, executions, and rape by government forces. The conditions for those who remain in the Buddhist-majority country are hard to know because the Rohingya are isolated in areas where foreigners are mostly banned from traveling. New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof slipped around police checkpoints and into remote Rohingya villages in Myanmar to document their plight. In a recent column, he describes the situation as a slow-motion genocide, a massive humanitarian crisis that the rest of the world is all but ignoring. I spoke with Kristof at the New York Times offices yesterday to learn more. You called this a slow-motion genocide. How come?
So originally, I called this an ethnic cleansing, but when you go and talk to the survivors and you hear about babies being thrown into bonfires, or about young men and boys being systematically having their throats cut or being shot. And then when that violence has subsided, then to see people being systematically denied medical care, and in some areas systematically denied food, systematically denied humanitarian assistance, then I don't know what else to call that but genocide. This is a deliberate policy aimed to make the life of one ethnic group unlivable.
This is your fourth trip in 4 years. How have you seen it change?
Originally, there was a lot of fear that this might blow up. Well, then it did blow up. There was this rebel group that began to attack Burmese government installations, and the result was this scorched earth response. And I think that in Myanmar, the decision was we just can't accommodate the Rohingya anymore. We need to drive them out and get rid of them and solve this once and for all. The Rohingya are confined to their villages or to a big, huge concentration camp. And they're not allowed to leave the villages for education, for jobs, for medical care. In some extreme circumstances, they can get permission and an escort to a medical center, but it's difficult to get. And so women who are pregnant end up dying in childbirth, or they lose their babies, and the kids can't go to school. And this is just because they are Rohingya.
One of the people that you profiled in your column was a woman who had just given birth. Tell us about that.
This is a woman called Sonawara. She's 18 years old. This is her first pregnancy. She's carrying twins. It's a high-risk pregnancy. But because the Rohingya in this village are not allowed to leave to get medical care, there's a traditional birth attendant who tries to help her deliver. She delivers, and both babies die unnecessarily.
What's the role been of Aung San Suu Kyi?
Aung San Suu Kyi was one of my heroes, and to see her now become complicit in this genocide against the Rohingya is heartbreaking. I think in retrospect that we gave her too much credit for being in favor of human rights broadly of the Burmese people. In fact, I think she was something of a Burma nationalist all along. And I think also that she fundamentally became a politician. And one of the problems is that the old political split in Burma was between the military and democracy. That has changed, so now it's essentially about how much you hate Muslims. And so for any politician, there's a fear that if they are soft on the Rohingya, they will be hurt politically. I think that Suu Kyi sees that. She's an opportunist, and she is afraid of being perceived as friendly to the Rohingya, speaking up for them. And so she's now a part of this.
You also mentioned when it comes to hating specific groups that there are active disinformation campaigns there, and social media is being used to rile people up.
I think I and a lot of people thought that, internet comes to a country, social media, this frees people from the tyranny of government control of information. And it does, but Facebook brought with it these vicious anti-Muslim propaganda campaigns that where photos are shown purportedly of the Rohingya slaughtering Buddhists, and they are spread around, and they're used to create hatred and to foster a broad desire among many, many Burmese that they need to get rid of the Rohingya.
Well, I know there have been attempts in the U.S. Congress to do something about it, but why the inaction right now?
I think part of the problem is that right now the Trump administration is not terribly interested in human rights around the world. It has its own focuses, and that we in the media, who normally would be highlighting these kinds of issues, we're now enormously distracted by President Trump himself. And there isn't really much of a business model in journalism for covering these kinds of stories. And without coverage, these kinds of crises persist.
Nick Kristof, thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Hedy Lamarr was one of the most iconic actresses of her day, known for her great beauty and said to be the inspiration for Catwoman and Snow White. But there was a part of her life that almost no one knew about. It turns out Hedy Lamarr was also a brilliant inventor. A new documentary film about her life opened widely in theaters across the nation this week and will air May 18th on American Masters on PBS. NewsHour Weekend's Megan Thompson spoke recently to Alexandra Dean, the director of Bombshell, the Hedy Lamarr story.
Tell us, who was Hedy Lamarr?
Hedy Lamarr was a Jewish child who was born in Austria in the shadow of the First World War. And then she became extraordinarily beautiful when she was about, say 10, 11 years old. And that kind of swept her away. She became an actress, and she flees to the United States and convinces Louis B. Mayer to make her his next great star on the silver screen. So she becomes, huge, the Angelina Jolie of her day. In all of these films with Spencer Tracy, Clark Gable, Jimmy Stewart.
That was the public Hedy Lamarr, but it was the private, unexpected Lamarr who director Alexandra Dean found far more compelling.
Inventing was her hobby. She not only had a complete inventing table set up in her house, but Howard Hughes gave her a small version of the set of equipment, which she had in the trailer where she stayed in between takes in her motion pictures.
We don't know everything that Hedy invented, but we know that during the Second World War, she teamed up first with Howard Hughes, who was a great inventor himself. He was trying to create the fastest airplane in the world at that time.
I thought the aeroplane was too slow. I decided that's not right. They shouldn't be square, the wings. So I bought a book of fish, and I bought a book of birds, and then used the fastest bird connected it with the fastest fish, and I drew it together and showed it to Howard Hughes, and they said, "You're a genius." And
you did?
Yeah.
So she had no formal training in engineering or chemistry or anything like that. She was just naturally gifted.
This is the amazing thing about Hedy Lamarr. She left school when she was 15 years old to become an actress. She loved chemistry, we know that.
She invented, during that period, a tablet that would fizz up and make a cola.
I had two chemists Howard Hughes gave me to do that. During the war, nobody had Coca-Cola, and I wanted to compress it into a tube so that servicemen and factory people, all they had to have is water and put it in.
During the Second World War, there was this chokehold around England of Nazi U-boats, and it felt like it was the end of the war. It felt like it was the turning point, and the Nazis were going to win because we couldn't get any supplies to England.
Jamming.
Nazi submarines kept eluding the Allies' attacks because the Germans were very good at hacking or jamming the radio signals that guided the Allies' torpedoes.
What Hedy Lamarr came up with was a radio signal between a ship and a torpedo that couldn't be hacked, that couldn't be jammed.
Rather than sending radio communications on just one frequency, as was normally done, Lamarr came up with the idea of making the signal leap from frequency to frequency.
Frequency hopping. You couldn't jam it because you'd only jam a split second of it in a single frequency.
So frequency change, frequency hop, frequency hop, frequency hop.
That concept, secure radio communications, was brilliant.
And that basic idea of frequency hopping became part of what's known as spread spectrum. Spread spectrum is what's in all of our technology today. I mean, Bluetooth is probably the most purely similar to what Hedy Lamarr invented, and Wi-Fi too. But spread spectrum is in a huge amount of inventions that we use on a daily basis.
Lamarr had a patent on the technology, but it was confiscated because she was an Austrian immigrant and considered an enemy alien. She was never compensated for her invention, which the film estimates to be worth around $30 billion today.
When we began making this film, some scientists said to me, she was probably a spy. She probably stole this invention from the Nazis and brought it to the Allies as a spy, and we just don't realize it now. But doesn't that make a lot more sense to you than this movie star coming up with this incredible invention? I mean, serious scientists said that to me at the beginning of my research, and I really had to confront that assumption in the film.
Part of what fueled those assumptions was that Lamarr had almost never spoken publicly about her invention. She'd never really taken credit for her own work.
And so I realized I had nothing really of her own record. And we really started Shoe Leather reporting and figuring out that there were about 75 people alive today that could possibly have something on Hedy Lamarr, and just systematically going down that list. And when we got to this guy, Fleming Meeks, who had written this article about her in 1990, he picked up the phone and he said to me, "I have been waiting 25 years for you to call me."
It's embarrassing. I found it behind that blue trash can. I'd had stuff stowed there and I moved it out of the way, and there it was.
It turned out he had tapes that basically told the whole of Hedy Lamarr's story, and they had never seen the light of day.
Yeah.
This is Fleming Meeks at Forbes.
Oh, hello. Thank you so much for the roses.
Oh, you're very welcome.
I love them. The brains of people are more interesting than the looks, I think. And then people have the idea of I'm a sort of a stupid thing.
What was that moment like for you as a filmmaker?
I think I cried when I first heard Hetty's voice.
I was different, I guess. Maybe I came from a different planet, who knows? But whatever it is, inventions are easy for me to do.
How did Hedy Lamarr's life end?
Hetty withdrew from the world at the end of her life. She really felt misunderstood. Part of it was a shoplifting arrest, which she may or may not have been guilty of. And part of it was that she had this really unfortunate plastic surgery at the end of her life to try and shore up that beauty. She was so withdrawn by the time she started to get recognized for her invention that she never came out publicly and accepted any claim for it. People ask me all the time if Hedy Lamarr's life was a tragic life to me. And I don't think it was, funnily enough. Even though she did have this really dark period, at the end of her life, she really examined what she'd been through and she came out with some wisdom. And the reason we know that is she would call her children and leave them these long messages on their answer phones, which they would record. And on one of her answer phone messages, we found her really trying to tell her son the message of her life through this poem.
Give the world the best you have, and you'll be kicked into the sea. Give the world the best you've got anyway.
And in the poem, she's saying to him, you know, you might feel kicked in the teeth. You might feel that the world never understands you or applauds you for your greatest achievements. But you know what? Do it anyway. Do it anyway, because it's in the doing, this great thing that will change the world, that you will find the meaning of your life.
Finally, tonight, President Trump is spending this evening rallying supporters outside of Pittsburgh in a district he easily won in 2016. It's a show of support for Republican congressional candidate Rick Saccone ahead of Tuesday's special election. Saccone is locked in a tight race with Democrat Conor Lamb to replace Republican Tim Murphy. Murphy, you'll remember, was an ardent opponent of abortion in Congress. He resigned after a local paper reported that he pressured his mistress to get an abortion when they thought she might be pregnant. That's all for this edition of PBS NewsHour Weekend. I'm Hari Srinivasan. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.